positive change of the Positive Vibe Show. I'm here with Caroline Palmy and Allison Sara Reiner. I'm Pete Cossaboon. Today's subject is on people pleasers, us pleasing other people, and really, I think, sort of losing ourselves. This is segment number 2, and we're really going to be talking about the power of selfishness. Ooh, I'm very excited about it. So we were talking before about how people pleasing tends to be a role that we take on. I think is sort of like a feedback loop. It's how we get our identity. It's how we know that we're safe. But then I think we all come to this sort of like space, or most of us do, where we decide to really kind of break out of that. And I think there's a lot of guilt wrapped around, stepping out of that people pleaser role. Did y'all ever experience, I think it sounds like we've all had sort of similar stories. Did y'all go through like a guilt period before you decided to really become selfish?
Not so much a guilt. It was more scary. It was so scary to say no, or I think I lost myself so completely. Sometimes I had no idea who I was anymore, what I liked. I mean, there's this movie with Julia Roberts, The Runaway Bride, and she was asked how she likes her ex, and she always liked it the way her fiancé liked it. And I think that was sort of me in a nutshell, not with the ex, but with everything else, So coming out of that people pleasing was maybe like a little chick coming out of the egg, it had a crack, and sort of timidly coming out and seeing, ooh, what's out there? It's a scary world, because that people-pleasing cave kept me safe. And now I had to go out in the wild world and be me. So, but it's a beautiful, beautiful journey to reconnect with myself. Yeah. Self-love is essential.
How about you, Allison?
Yeah, no, I was laughing because people pleasing sounds so lovely, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want to please the people? So it's really, when you've got, that's the terminology that we're using, and we're breaking out of that. It sounds really selfish. And I think I started maybe a lot more slowly. I started away from myself. So I was buying myself time, for instance. So, as somebody that if you asked me if I wanted to go out, I didn't have the clarity of mind to know that I could question myself, do I want to go out? So I started doing things like that, putting in place little techniques like, let me just check my diary. Because a lot of the times, the thing about being a people pleaser is a lot of the time, you would say yes anyway if you actually took a step back and think about it, but it gets so mired in the resentment that you feel against other people for asking you, and the self-flagellation that you feel for never being able to say no, that you don't even enjoy the times that you would turn up naturally, because you're not sure of that, of that fine line. So for me, I started saying things like, let me check my diary and I'll get back to you. Or, even with my husband, I think I was probably the biggest people pleaser. I started saying no for stupid things. It's things that I knew weren't going to bother either of us particularly, and just sort of built it up from there. But it was, I remember that. I still go into it sometimes, but that fear that comes from, what will they say? What will they think? And then almost the feeling let down when people say, all right then. There's nothing more to it. And the people that don't say all right then and keep pushing and pushing and pushing, I found that the more I've worked on my getting rid of people pleasing and setting those firm boundaries, those people have kind of disappeared from my life. They weren't, they didn't want me for me. They wanted me for what they could get. But that's another thing that we're terrified of, is losing people. We don't realize that losing people allows the right people to come in.
And we also had the thought that it's almost sort of like as we are people pleasers, we're almost sort of robbing the world of our own selves. And we're putting the pressure on other people to decide everything. I think we're really kind of diminishing ourselves and also what's possible between us and the others, right?
Yeah. I remember clearly on so many occasions, my husband would say, but make a decision. And I thought, I really genuinely thought I was being nice by saying, I didn't have a particular preference for this or this, probably because I didn't want to do either. So I would say, oh, I don't mind. And it would drive him absolutely wild. Like, just for once, can you mind and say this? Or so then I'd end up making a decision. I don't want to do it anyway. But yeah, so it's frustrating for other people as well. It's not just that we're putting responsibility for everything onto other people. It's bloody frustrating to be around a people pleaser.
Right, absolutely. So I think it's really like almost kind of one of the most loving things is to sort of step into your own power, whereas we think that people pleasing is the most loving thing. I actually think in a weird sort of way, it really is the selfish part, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just so much more clarity, even with other people, even if I have a client and they say, oh, I don't know, any time is right. I think sort of, hello, tell me your preference, or, or I became more clearly sort of like Tuesday, 2:00, it is, it's so much more clarity there. And also I think as a recovering doormat, I don't want to take advantage of someone else. I'm very sensitive towards that. If someone has no sort of idea or something, it's sort of like, come on, you can do this. It's a weird situation.
It is. It's interesting how people really sort of react. And kind of come back to us in that space, isn't it? And how we even, I think, I love what Allison said, giving actual tools for that, like using the power of postponement. Like maybe if you can't say no right up front, you can just say not yes at the moment, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
And just remember what Louise Hay said, something, if you say yes to someone, just make sure you're not actually saying no to yourself. And that has helped me really a big deal for myself. That was always the reminder. If I say yes, do I say no to me or do I say yes to me? And give yourself that time, like, oh, I come back to you tomorrow. It's really great.
Right. And, I think especially probably for moms and perhaps dads, perhaps we're seeing, the cycle we went through and we want to help our children and not really necessarily go with that. So how can we make this happen earlier? How can we facilitate, that earlier in somebody's life?
I see my children, and I can't take any credit for it because I learned my lessons pretty late. They were already around, but I see how easily they can say yes to themselves and no to other people. And so I think it's a case of not knocking that out of them. I think that's what happened to us, and not because our parents were bad parents. It's because that they didn't know any differently. That's how we did things. Society expected girls to do X, boys to do Y, little children to do X and Y all together. And and that's what they taught us to do. So they knocked out our individuality. Whereas we have the opportunity not to do that with our children, to actually celebrate it when we see the bullshit, I'm not doing that, it doesn't suit me. Instead of saying, you're being bad, say, well done. However, maybe in this instance, when Gran's coming to visit for the first time in X amount of years, it would be good if you could put on a pair of trousers rather than those, whatever it is, at least acknowledge that what they're doing is right for them, and not knock it out. I think we don't need to do much more than that. Or maybe that's just my children.
Go ahead,
or giving them a choice, would you like the red jacket or the blue jacket? Would you love the jeans or the beige trousers? Sort of a choice within reasons, not like what would you love to eat, but would you love spaghetti or other pasta? Little choices they can make when they're little, and really then when their spouse invites them to dinner here or there, they know where they want to go, and go with it.
Right. And do you think it was almost sort of like a necessary thing as far as like society's point of view to have us as people pleasers up to this point, but now that we're becoming so much more individualistic and so much more connected and things like that, because society was very structured and everything before, and now it's sort of becoming this sort of very amorphous type of thing. I mean, do you think it was sort of a necessary thing in order for the for people to be able to get along. Does that make sense to you?
Question makes sense. I'll let Caroline go first while I mull it over.
I think sometimes it's all about fitting in, isn't it? We try to fit into our family, we try to fit in at school, we try to fit in society. And back then it was much more about fitting in and not sticking out. And I think nowadays it's more about individuality. Children are allowed to read at different levels. They don't always have to be at the same level. And so I think it's much easier nowadays to really stand out or be your own kind of beautiful flower. You don't have to be a tulip among all tulips. You can be the rose or something, you know.
I love that. I love that idea. Allison, did you think about the subject?
I did. I was thinking, I was trying to think how to formulate it. So I'm Catholic, and I was brought up in Glasgow. And Scotland and Ireland are were very, very Catholic, or parts of Scotland and most of Ireland. And the church there its job was to dictate how we lived our lives and how we thought and how we behaved. And it's a very, very difficult way to navigate the world, because it's such a strong influence in your life and in your behavior and in your thought pattern. And then I came to Italy, which is, of course, the home of the Pope, the home of Catholicism, and it's a completely different atmosphere. It's here it's kind of like a guiding force. It's not there to keep you small. It's there to guide you along and to give you some suggestion, as opposed to being the absolute law. So for me, it's been a really odd awakening, if you like, because of course I rebelled against Catholicism and my religion of birth, because I found it really constrained me. And then I arrive here and I see how it can work beautifully to keep people working in the same direction, but without suffocating them. So, and the other thing that comes up for me a lot is it just that I move in different circles now? Are we that more individualistic, or are we just moving in a circle that we weren't used to moving in 10 years or 20 years ago? So the answer is, I don't know the answer to yours, but it's, I see how it can work when it's not being used to suffocate. Not just religion, but society as a whole, when it's been used to sort of enhance and draw out our better qualities, rather than to keep us down and keep us small and keep us from thinking. Because a lot of the time that's what it was used for. It was to stop us using our own power of thought and just comply. That was a bit.
I love it.
It's very on me. Caroline will tell you.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty good place to stop here in the second segment here on the idea of people pleasers. Pete Cossaboon here, Caroline Palmy, and Allison Sara Reiner of Project Positive Change on the Positive Vibes Show on people pleasers. This has been segment number 2, and tune in for number 3.